I arrived at the Anabasis Wellness Retreat just after dawn, guided the last 40 miles by a sandy track that spun out of the Nevada flats like a pale thread. My assignment as a doctoral candidate in clinical psychology was to assist Dr. Miriam Falstead in observing the efficacy of deep phase isolation therapy. The brochure called it radical mindfulness. Critics called it designer sensory deprivation. 8 participants had paid small fortunes for a 10-day program meant to strip the psyche of trauma the way lime strips rust from old pipe. The facility was a low cinder block labyrinth crouched behind a ring of wind-carved boulders. Aside from a solar array and the oval tanks in their refrigerated annex, there was nothing but horizon. Miriam greeted me with her habitual brisk hug, then introduced the cohort over weak coffee. Kevin, an Iraq veteran nursing a demolition of nerves. Lila, a muralist famous for dreamscapes and panic attacks. Marcus, a crypto baron whose fortune had not protected him from nightly paralysis. Sunita, a middle school counselor shattered by a school shooting. Roland, a soft-spoken field archaeologist who, unlike the rest, insisted he was fine, merely curious. The remaining 3, Chloe, Arthur, and Wesley, were corporate refugees with various flavorless diagnoses. Day 1 began with baseline interviews, yoga, a meal of purees, then the first float. The chambers resembled oversized coffins sunk waist-deep in Epsom salt brine, lids that sealed to exclude even body heat. Clients floated naked in 98-degree water. For a maximum purge, Miriam ordered 5-hour sessions, far longer than the 45 minutes recommended by standard manuals. I manned the biomonitor console. Through bone-conductive microphones, I could hear only the faint rustle of movement. Electrodes sent out graphs, slowed pulse, theta waves blooming. At hour 4, every graph erupted simultaneously with spikes. Lights on the console flashed red, precaution alarms. Yet inside the annex, no one thrashed or called out. Their bodies floated calmly, but neurologically they were aflame. When the lids lifted at last, each participant emerged shivering, eyes dilated, breathing as though they'd sprinted miles. Lila vomited on her towel. Kevin had wet himself. Roland, the archaeologist, simply whispered, "Impossible," over and over, as if rehearsing a new vocabulary. Miriam and I spent the night downloading EEG data. The patterns synchronized at the moment of the spike. It was as if 8 distinct brains had briefly run the same program. Miriam, no mystic, still looked frightened. "Shared suggestion?" she ventured. "Mass dissociation?" She did not convince herself. At breakfast, Sunita broke the ice. "Did anyone else see streets? Underground?" Heads rose. Her words popped whatever privately held bubbles the others had been guarding. They began talking at once. Sandstone towers, arched bridges, an avenue lined with statues of headless kings. Each participant described the same architecture, the same perspective, looking up from a pit at a drowned city roofed by earth. They had heard a voice, genderless, reverberant as a cathedral organ, using different languages but conveying one imperative: exhume us. Miriam shut the conversation down, prescribing silent reflection and journaling. Her professional caution only stoked the fire. During the afternoon workshop, I saw scribbles on notepads, rough maps, meshes of streets radiating like spokes. Night fell. The desert cooled to 40 degrees, coyotes yelping. I lay in my bunk, hearing the murmurs of other cabins, low but intent. Dreamless, I woke to metallic clanging. Kevin and Marcus were prying open the storage shed where we kept landscaping tools. I confronted them. Kevin's pupils were bottomless pits. "We just need shovels," he stated, as if that explained everything. By the time Miriam arrived, half the group stood by a swale behind the water tank, stomping the ground, listening. "It's hollow," Roland declared. "Sediment overlay, no more than 6 feet thick." He claimed the chamber had shown him this precise coordinate, a cross-reference of stars and topography. Chloe nodded vigorously. She had drawn a sketch matching Roland's. Miriam ordered everyone back inside. She threatened expulsion, lawsuits, the refusal of refunds. It worked for perhaps 4 hours. After lunch, the participants sat cross-legged in the common room, radiating a collective tension that made the air feel ionized. The minute our backs were turned, they bolted. I sprinted after them and found an excavation already begun. Sunita thrust a shovel like a woman possessed, blistering her palms without pause. Marcus calculated depth intervals as if calling out stock prices. They were heedless of sunstroke, of torn skin, of scents. Miriam radioed the regional sheriff. The dispatcher promised deputies at dawn. Night travel on that road was impossible. That evening, Miriam forbade additional floats. The tanks were the vector, cut the vector. But the group had swallowed something that no welding torch could now seal shut. Arthur poured bleach into one of the tanks, babbling that the city's voice had retreated there. Chlorine fumes forced us all outside. With no choice, Miriam and I set up a watch on rotation. I took the 2 a.m. slot, perched on a folding chair under a winking sky. A thin wind carried the smell of disturbed soil. At 3:15, Roland approached, hands raised. "Jonah, come see." I refused. He crouched beside me, whispering the city's name. He insisted it had divulged a proper name, but my later memory retains only a throat-tearing sequence of consonants. He said the city predated language, gravity, maybe time. "We're not hallucinating," he pleaded. "We're receiving." When my shift ended, Wesley replaced me. At dawn, we discovered Wesley conscious but catatonic, cradled in the hole they had dug. All 8 participants ringed him, faces smeared with red desert dust like war paint. The pit was 5 feet deep, 12 feet across, cleaner than any labor crew could have managed overnight. At the center, half exposed, lay a rectangular slab of white stone. Roland asked me to feel it. Against my better judgment, I knelt, touching its surface. The stone was colder than any object should have been beneath desert sediment. Runnels covered it, forming miniature streets, bridges, domes. The city in relief, a fractal model. When my fingertips traced one avenue, a bolt of imagery slammed my mind. Lights burning under a sunless sky, multitudes chanting from balconies, the same command over and over. "Exhume us." I jerked back, heart pounding. Miriam dragged the group away with promises we would document the find, call proper authorities. They followed, docile for the moment, leaving Wesley lying on the slab as though offered in tribute. We stretchered him inside. His eyes fluttered. His lips moved silently, reciting coordinates. Miriam phoned every emergency contact she could. University archaeologists, the county coroner for Wesley, the DEA in case psychotropic contamination was to blame. No one could reach us before the next day. The old CB radio sputtered and died mid-call. Later, we found its cable severed. By mid-morning, Kevin and Arthur had stripped wiring from their cabins and fashioned crude dowsing rods. They stalked the compound, stopping every dozen steps, rods twitching toward the dig site. Lila painted the slab's pattern onto her own torso in sunscreen, a luminous map on brown skin. When I tried to confiscate a pickaxe, Kevin struck me across the shoulder. Pain flashed white. I stumbled clear. Blood dripped onto the sand. Kevin saw it and grinned with an almost filial pride, as though I too had offered something. Miriam assembled the participants in the dining hall and invoked legal release forms. The retreat waived responsibility for self-harm. Anyone continuing unauthorized excavation would be isolated in the medical unit. Marcus laughed. "Isolation is how you open the door," he said. "You think a locked door will shut it." That afternoon, as heat shimmered off the mudcrete walls, they overpowered Miriam. Sunita distracted her with tears. Roland struck from behind with a serving tray. They bound her wrists with yoga straps and carried her to the stone slab, which was now almost fully uncovered. I ran after them, brandishing my phone as if I could live stream the desert's silence. Marcus declared the slab a lid. It bore no seams, yet he insisted it would lift if we were sufficiently aligned. Alignment, he explained, meant consent, the yielding of ego. He pressed the blade of a trowel into his forearm, drawing a line of blood. "Our seal," he proclaimed. One by one they copied him, smearing blood across the stone, chanting the city's impossible name. I tried to free Miriam. Kevin blocked me. His irises had changed shade, now a hazy amber like dawn seen through dust. In that moment, Roland called my name gently. "Jonah, it wants professionals. You studied stratigraphy for your undergrad minor, right? You know how to excavate without damage." He offered me a trowel crusted with his blood. For an instant, less than heartbeat, I looked at the slab and felt an urge rip through my marrow. Knowledge unspooled. Depths, chambers, vaults full of brittle scrolls, engines that ran on breath. I saw how to open it. 6 hands placed upon 6 glyphs, a simultaneous downward pressure while chanting a note that would resonate the lock. I flung the trowel away. The urge receded like a stepped-on snake. I grabbed Roland's shoulder and shouted at him to listen to reason. Reason had gone extinct. His face was a sunken ruin from which only the city's reflected grandeur still shone. Kevin punched me again. This time, I stayed down. They forced Miriam's palm onto the nearest glyph, heedless of her shouted ethics. The slab did not budge. Marcus cursed. Sunita wept in frustration. Then Chloe noticed Wesley, still semi-conscious on a camp mattress nearby. "He heard the coordinates first," she said. "He's attuned." I crawled to Wesley, interposing my body, but they lifted him with tender care. When his hand touched the glyph, the slab issued a low clicking. Lines of pale light ignited across its surface, tracing the relief map like veins. Dust boiled away. Somewhere inside the stone, a mechanism woke from a 1,000-year nap. A seam appeared. The slab split lengthwise, halves hinging apart to reveal a black spiral stairway descending beyond the reach of noon. A vagrant wind exhaled upward, stinking of coriander and ozone. That was all it took. Kevin led the descent, wielding a miner's lamp they'd stolen from the workshop. Lila followed, stroking the air as if parting curtains of velvet. Roland beckoned me. I shook my head. "Chronicler, then," he said, and vanished below. Sirens wailed in the distance, the sheriff finally on the road. I pulled Miriam away as best I could. Her wrists were abraded, eyes swollen. But she managed a broken whisper. "We seal it. Collapse the stair." She rummaged in her pocket. The retreat kept emergency explosive bolts for demolishing old septic lines. She had palmed 2 cartridges when they bound her. We staggered to the maintenance cube, collecting det cord and a hand drill. Every minute was a century. The spiral gaped, patient. Echoes rose. The group was singing now, a 6-note litany. The sound twisted my gut, bending pitch midway, as though geometry itself were drunk. At the 6th step, I felt magnetic pull, a vertigo dragging me forward. Miriam gripped the rail, drilled a quick hole into the limestone of the opening, stuffed the charge, set the 2-minute timer. We retreated, dragging Wesley, who blinked but did not speak. From 100 feet away, behind the generator shed, we heard the blast. Dust geysered skyward. When it cleared, the slab's halves had slammed shut. Fuse lines fused into molten streaks. The staircase mouth was clogged by fractured stone. Silence expanded, huge and wheezing. Deputies arrived minutes later, guns drawn. They herded us to shade, demanded statements. But the participants did not reappear. Search teams with titanium borers tried to reopen the slab. They drilled 13 feet without finding void. It was as if the stairwell had never existed. By sundown, engineers withdrew for safety. Roland, Kevin, and the others were declared missing, presumed lost in an underground collapse. In the weeks that followed, I gave depositions to county and federal agents. They asked about cult indoctrination, designer drugs, electromagnetic interference. Miriam's data files showed nothing extraordinary, except that moment of synchronized EEG spike, labeled simply Event 0. 3 of the deputies quit, haunted by tinnitus. They kept hearing a subterranean chord. The retreat closed. Investors sued. Miriam wrote her professional obituary of the project and retreated to an island clinic. Yet the story does not end with bureaucratic aftermath. 1 month later, I woke in my apartment to find red desert sand on my bedroom floor. On the wall above my desk was a charcoal sketch. Towers, bridges, headless kings. I had no memory of drawing it. Wesley, who remained in a rehabilitation center, repeated one phrase between long silences: "Depth is relative." The city is quieted, but sometimes in dreams I feel pressure behind my eyes, as if something telepathic presses against the aquarium glass of my skull. I recall the glow along the slab's seams and understand that a door closed can always be opened again, if it wants. Miriam sends me postcards from her island, each blank except for GPS coordinates that circle closer and closer toward some mid-oceanic trench. I have not answered. My academic career is over. No institution will touch my name. Still, most nights I find myself reading archaeology blogs, sonar scans of subduction zones, articles about rumored gas pockets under major cities that make whole districts smell briefly of coriander after heavy rain. When that scent arrives, people report mass epiphanies, identical dreams about excavations. I keep my suitcase packed. A trowel lies on top of folded clothes, despite every resolution I have made. I tell myself I carry it only as a memento, a reminder of failure. But sometimes my fingers trace the handle, and the urge shivers through me again, bright and cold as starlight spilling into a buried stairwell. How long until another slab calls? How long until I answer?